Austin Mock, as you can imagine, Tennessee and their fans are in a bit of an uproar after Saturday's game. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. It was going into the weekend. It was not expected to be a great weekend of college football with marquee games or anything, but that might have been the best weekend of the year. It's going to be hard to top that one.
Buddy, I'll tell you, I've been around college football for 25 years because I'm old. And I was telling somebody yesterday, I don't think I've ever seen a Saturday like that. No exaggeration.
Yeah, I mean, just the top 10 teams, what was it, 4 or 5 losing to unranked teams? Yeah, like that was like the weekend everybody was like, hey, take a break. If you want to miss some football, this is the weekend to do something with your family or something, because next weekend has all the big games. But it just kept coming on Saturday. They just was big upset after big upset. It was a fun watch. Probably not for Tennessee fans, though.
Family schmamly on that. All right, hit the like and subscribe button. If you're on the Twitter, hit like and you can reshare there. I guess it's X now. Austin, tell us about what you do for The Athletic, because I stumbled upon your work over the weekend, basically a bracketology, and I go back to Jerry Palm, who did that for CBS Sports with basketball, and now it's a real thing. So talk about what you do, and then we'll see if Tennessee can get in the college football playoff despite what happened on Saturday.
Yeah, so I work with data and projecting college football teams. I do it for NFL as well. And, when the college football playoff started back in 2014, we had this committee selecting the process. And a few years ago, I was like, I don't really see many people trying to predict what the committee is going to do. So I created, based on resume, based on your strength of schedule and record and whatnot, I tried to predict, based on what past committees have done, predict the playoff. And now we have a full blown bracket. So I simulate the whole season. Based on the results of that season, I then project a bracket, and that's on the Athletic every week. There are projected current bracket, which at Tennessee, right on the bubble as it stands.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. So if we have the first college football playoff committee show on Wednesday, is Tennessee in the 12 if it were Wednesday?
I think no. I think the way that I have it, they'd be the first team out. Now, part of that, I don't know how they're going to do the rankings. Like, I don't think they're going to rank like Utah or Kansas State, the Big 12 team. I don't think they'll be like 4th or anything like that. Maybe they will. I don't know how they're going to do the rankings. But Tennessee, first team out. I think Clemson is ahead of them. But I could see a scenario where I have Notre Dame in right now. As the projection goes, they're the team that's in, because I think their schedule is much easier than Tennessee's. But I think the loss kind of knocks them into probably that 10, 11, maybe the 13th overall seed, because the 12th seed is probably going to go to a group of 5 teams. So they're right on the bubble. They got some big games going that are going to be, I think, kind of coin flips. They're going to need one to probably go their way to get in.
Go ahead, Caleb. Go ahead.
Austin, you brought up the schedule. How much do you think the committee, though, is, given the fact that in this 12-team playoff, and the fact that ESPN has ties with the SEC, I don't know if there's any smoke-filled room decisions that come with that, but do you not think they would favor more heavily SEC teams, even though this year the SEC doesn't look significantly above everybody else the way it has in years past? But don't you think they'd still favor a 10-2 Tennessee over an 11-1 Clemson?
Yeah, definitely, because the ACC is like the SEC. What, everybody but Texas has a loss at this point. That seems pretty rare for what the last 20 years of the SEC has been. But I still think like the Big Ten doesn't look all that great or deep. The ACC and the Big 12 kind of the same thing. So I think it's just like a trend in college football is we're kind of getting more parity. So I do think the schedule is going to come in to play here. Like NC State being as bad as they've been isn't helping Tennessee. That's one of those games where you thought, like, coming into the year, like, hey, that might help them down the road of, like, even if they're a 9-3 team, maybe being ranked ahead of a 10-2 ACC or Big 12 team. So I do think they'll get credit for it. Now it's again, it's like one of those things that you see this more in college basketball. Tennessee is now like Arkansas fans. You kind of need Arkansas to keep it going, because that loss that matters in the perception. If like Arkansas falls off and loses out, Now it's like, okay, that's a pretty bad loss. Whereas if they, do a decent job, go like 7-5, now it's like, okay, that was a solid loss. So just those, I think that will matter in the end, is what your schedule looks like. And they're going to be grading like, hey, your loss, like Notre Dame has a problem because they're going to have most likely the worst loss on the schedule.
I think Heather Dinich said last week at ESPN that Tennessee would not be a lock at 10-2, that to be a lock, they would need to be 11-1. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so 11-1, they're definitely in. Like there's no way. But as we saw this past weekend, I just think like the schedule, the parity, there's more parity, and the schedules are tougher. Like you're bringing in with the Big Ten bringing in Oregon, and like we're seeing Washington, they could be 6-0, even though, they're 4-2 right now. I don't think that's an easy win for teams. Oklahoma hasn't really been amazing this year, but I don't think that's an easy win by any means. So I think we're going to see, like, I don't think it's going to be like 10-2, 9-3 is definitely out. 10-2, you're on the bubble. The way it's shaping up, like, I think 10-2 it almost like gets you in at this point, because I don't know how many teams right now. Again, everybody but Texas has a loss in the SEC already, and we're not even halfway through the season for most teams. So are we going to say like everybody's going to end up 10-2? Like Georgia has a really tough schedule. 9-3 Georgia, they're for sure going to still be on the bubble there. So I think 10-2. I don't want to say it's a lock, but I'd probably say it's probably in the range of like, I think like 75% of the time that Tennessee goes 10-2, that they're going to make the playoff.
All right, Caleb, go ahead and jump in there, sir.
Also, let me ask you about the schedule strength method, because it's funny you brought up, you're right, teams like Arkansas and Washington that could easily be undefeated right now. We all know what college basketball did for years, where they just literally took the RPI as gospel. And the RPI overweighted its schedule strength. And not only did they weight it heavily, but it was only based on the records of your opponents and your opponents' opponents. Should schedule strength, and does it, do you think, with this committee, include eye test at all? When what I mean by that is Arkansas, you say, oh, not a quality opponent, or maybe they are, they're 4-2 now, but does it count that towards Tennessee's schedule strength that they're 4-2, but they could easily be 6-0 right now? They're 2 plays away from that.
Well, and on the other side, Austin, let me throw this at you. I thought they looked like hot garbage, and that Tennessee looked even worse. So I don't know what the eye test tells you there.
Yeah, so the thing about the eye test is that game happened in early October, so it'll just look back and be like, it was just a loss. There's no memory of it, really. Yeah, so I don't. It's kind of tough because, again, we don't know exactly what the committee's talking about. Like the college basketball has gone to the net rankings, and I think those are overall like much better in terms of like adjusting for your opponent correctly, not just like, hey, you played a bunch of teams that were bad, but they had decent records, like RPI. Gave you a good boost there. So, yeah, I think it's one of those things. Like Tennessee's going to have a good strength of schedule. The SEC is the best conference in football. I think it's a decent bit. So, I think they'll be fine in that regard. But I just think the eye test is more of, at the end of the day, if you lose to a 7-5 Arkansas team, like you have that versus like a 5-7 Arkansas team, it just makes a difference. Like, these are humans making the decision to rank these teams. And if it's truly between like a, Tennessee and Clemson, and say Clemson's losses Miami and Georgia, and Tennessee has that Arkansas blemish on there, it's like, that pains us a little bit more. So I think it does matter from an eye test standpoint. But I think it's more of just like overall record. And they're an SEC opponent. Like, okay, you lost to one of the worst teams in your conference. That I think that can hurt you.
Okay, let me ask you this. Other than the obvious, Tennessee fans would love for Alabama to lose the rest of their games and Georgia to lose the rest of their games, and on and on and on. But other than the obvious, who is Tennessee rooting against? Like, teams on the bubble, not necessarily in the conference, or you've got A&M, so they're in the conference, but who does Tennessee need to go into this week rooting against before that kickoff against Florida in the 7 hour?
Yeah, so Big 12 and ACC teams, you have to root for neither of those conferences getting an at-large bid. Like, you don't want Clemson to go into an ACC championship game against Miami, or say like Miami's 11-1. They're both one loss or better. You got to avoid that, because that's just another team on the bubble. It's really like we're finally getting to the college basketball. It's like, March Madness bubble watch type thing. Texas A&M is one. As like ugly as it's been for the Aggies in the first month of the season, they've find themselves 3-0 in the SEC right now. Like their schedule is kind of manageable, so you're going to have to root against them. And a sneaky one, Big Ten, Indiana is one that you have to. In the past, the committee it's been like record has been what's mattered. They are not other than Florida State last year, but it's Indiana. They're sitting at 6-0. Their schedule is like Michigan doesn't look as strong. If they're 11-1, they're going to be in. So you need Indiana to lose as well, because it doesn't make sense. They're not known as a football school, but wins matter here. So you really need those teams to lose. So
based on the odd test, I'll say if Indiana makes a 12-team playoff, we should just blow it up and start all over.
Well, I actually, based on the eye test, they look better than Tennessee so far this year.
I'll give Indiana credit. They've crushed everybody. Like, it's one of those things. Like when you put, it's bad teams. It's like, hey, they haven't played anybody, but they're winning by 30, 40 points. It's like, okay, at least they're doing what they're supposed to do. They're not limping around against weaker competition. So I'll give them credit. Schedule gets a little bit tougher. They've a bunch of kind of coin flip games coming up here. And then I think they played Michigan and Ohio State back to back. So we'll get the real test of where they are. But yeah, Cignetti's won. He was at Elon. He turned them around, and then he kept it going with James Madison. So I think he's a good coach. But yeah, Indiana, not many people at Indiana being like they're on the bubble. I have them as the second team out right now because of how their schedule works out with they just have Michigan, Ohio State. If they take care of business other than that, like 10-2 Indiana with losses to Michigan, Ohio State, when you're comparing resumes, it's what we're going to be doing. Like what's 10-2 Indiana with losses to Michigan, Ohio State versus say 9-3 Tennessee. Does the Arkansas loss crush Tennessee there? I don't like. We're going to find out, and that's what's going to make this season so much fun.
All right, buddy. Great job. You do it for the NFL as well, so people can check that out, see where the Titans land. Austin, we greatly appreciate your work. Take care, man.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, guys. Have a good one.
I appreciate it with The Athletic. I mean, he does a really cool job with this bracketology, and it shows you the last teams in.